Hello everyone, I'm Lazy Grouse and today we're going to talk about all the new units in the Warriors of Chaos roster in SFO Grimhammer. And we're going to go through all of their stats and abilities, and at the end of the video I'm going to show you how to get them in your own campaign. So, first up is the Chaos Cultist units, which comes in both a spear unit and a maces variant. And their stats aren't anything to write home about, they're not great, but they're fine for what they do. And they also come with a very strong ability where they can cause damage to themselves to buff everyone around them with a lot of melee attack and some leadership. Lasts for 30 seconds and it's a pretty strong ability for a pretty early game unit. Next is the Bloodletters of Corn, which is the first demon unit we're gonna have a look at, and they are anti-infantry infantry. They got the on fire condition when they attack someone. They got flaming attacks, so they're gonna take advantage of that on fire condition, as well as magical attacks, so they'll get through all of that physical resistance. They have pretty high melee defense and melee attack, but they have blood sacrifice, so as long as their hit points are greater than 50%, they become way better at killing things. They get a base and armor piercing bonus with some extra melee attack at the cost of some armor, but that armor isn't gonna be too important because they also have a 50% physical resistance, which is gonna be a common thing with our demons. Next up is the Demonets of Slaanesh, which is a fairly quick infantry unit with vanguard, so you can plop them down anywhere on the, anywhere within the vanguard zone and hunt down backline units or similar things. They are also pretty good at fighting in front lines because they have decent weapon strength with a lot of armor piercing weapon damage. They are unbreakable like all the other demons, and pretty durable thanks to their physical resistance. They also cause charm, which helps with their tankiness, as well as magical attacks, which is also going to be a common theme with the demon units. And then we have the Plaguebearers of Nergal, which the models looks amazing, and they really have that look that only Nurgle could love. So they have a bigger unit size than the other demons and a huge hit points total, and which helps with their general tankiness because they have pretty high melee defense, and they also have regeneration of 4 hit points per second, so these are gonna stand there and just tank it. They survive for so long in sustained melee combat. Although they are kind of weaker in damage, although all of it is armor piercing, which is really nice. But the rest of their stats aren't great. They have poison, and they have melee attack with that physical resistance that all the other demons have. And last but not least, my favorite, the Pink Horrors of Tzeentch, which has a missile attack, which causes a pretty big explosion of their missiles. So if you can get them to just shoot into infantry blobs, it will just be a pink pool of something left on the ground. It just removes units. And the drawback is they are not that great in melee. They can handle themselves, but you want to use them at range, where they do great. They are unbreakable like the others and physical resistance 50 like usual. And now we get to the human infantry, the God Touch infantry units, Guardians of the Dark Prince of Desires. These are the Slaanesh special units, and they come with a couple of cool abilities like Visions of Pleasures, which it activates when they're in melee, so it debuffs everyone around them and adds a little miscast chance, which is very handy. They get Chaotic Crusades, which boosts their damage, and they also have Vanguard, and they causes terror. So these guys are really strong, since you you can Vanguard deploy them and then just go around and charge into the flank because they are pretty fast. But their charge bonus is crazy and the rest of the stats are really good. They have a high missile resistance, so you don't have to worry that much about missile units picking them off before they reach them. So overall, really strong units that can just delete things if they get to jump on them. Next up we have the Berserkers of Corn, which are absolute murder machines when you get them in melee. They have very high weapon strength, they have pretty high melee attack, and they also have Rage of the Blood God, which as long as someone is close enough, they will pop this, get a charge bonus when they get in, bonus attack, bonus melee attack, more weapon damage, charge speed and vigor, and they lose a little bit of melee defense, but the thing is, when they get in there, they just slaughter other infantry units. So, and they can actually survive quite a bit, even though they have low melee defense, because they have high armor and some physical resistance. So they do actually survive quite a bit in melee, but in sustained combat, if they don't kill it fast enough, they will take a lot of damage. And next up is the Sons of the Last Plague, the Elite Nurgle Infantry, which is really tanky. They have high armor, pretty high melee defense, and some physical resistance. They also have regeneration and Touch of the Plague, which causes a bunch of direct damage, and on contact they poisons with lethal poison, which deals damage and debuffs the enemy. And the Plague here, which debuffs them even more and deals even more damage. And I do think these stack. So the first 30 seconds of combat, these will be extra tanky and deal extra damage. And overall they have pretty good weapon strength, but their job in general is to tank, but deal some attrition damage while they do it. And the last of the elite infantry of the different gods, we have Zealots of Change, which is the Tzeentch elite infantry. And the first glance you get at their stats, they aren't that strong. They have pretty weak stats compared to the other elite infantry. But when you get into their abilities, you see how they are really strong. So they got Soul Leech of Tzeentch, which is a direct damage ability which can hit multiple units. It is an area of effect spell, and not only it deals it damage, it also debuffs the units a little bit. And also they have a pretty big heal, and it heals in an area as well, so not only does it heal up these guys, it also heals up the other infantry you have around them, so which makes them really good support infantry. And you can do this 5 times if the battle goes really long, which is really strong. And as long as they survive long enough, you get one basically free unit of Chaos Spawn along with these guys, because hey, they can spawn Chaos Spawn, which is really strong. They also have Sword of Change, which, oh, that's the one we just looked at. We also have No Time for Death. So entities cannot die while this is active, and it is constant as long as their leadership is only 50%, so their unit size will stay constant until their leadership drops. They also have the Chaotic Crusade, which the other elite infantry has as well, and they cause fear. And then we have the Hounds of Decay. Huge hound units that deals loads of damage. They are really strong anti-infantry hound units, so if you can get these in an archer line or just a squishier infantry unit, they will just melt. They come with lethal poison, They have Swarm of Flies, so constantly around them, everything has less melee attack and takes a bunch of damage. They have Regeneration and some physical resistance, so they can actually survive better than their stats would suggest that they will. But you generally want them in archer lines rather than throw them into damage dealing infantry. They also added the Greater Chaos Dragons, which is basically the mount that the Warriors of Chaos Lords can ride in vanilla, but now you can finally get them in campaign as well as a single entity monster unit, which is really good. I don't understand why it's not in the base game. It really should. But it's pretty much a basic dragon. It's got really good stats, like a dragon does. It got a very strong breath attack, and it causes terror. And it got some neat resistances. Otherwise, it's pretty standard, except for the Searing Flame, which deals damage to units that it's attacking, and weakens it to fire damage, and debuffs its combat stats, and some flaming attacks. And finally, the thing everyone's been waiting for, the Bloodthirster, Kabanda the Exalted. So, this is a new hero unit that you can get by doing a special ritual, as I'll show after this. And he's just a killing machine. He causes flammable on attack with flaming attacks, so he'll debuff and deal some extra damage with flaming attacks. He's got huge weapon strength and melee attack, but his melee defense is not that great. But he'll do just fine anyway, and I'll show you why. First of all, there's Axe of the Purge. It's an explosion centered around him, and it deals a bunch of damage to everyone who stays around him during this explosion, because it remains exploding for 10 seconds, so it's basically a stationary burning head. We got Rage of Khorne, which deals some damage to himself, but he hugely boosts his both base weapon damage and armor piercing weapon damage and melee attack, so he can take some extra damage but deals huge amount of damage back. And he gets Deadly Onslaught, which is pretty standard. And we also have Blood Rage, why the melee defense isn't as important, because the longer he stays in combat, the more flame resistance he'll get, the more melee attack he'll get, and the more physical resistance he'll get. So at stage 3, he also gets regeneration without a cap. So as long as he stays in combat, he just gets stronger and stronger. He just feeds off that slaughter, which is so in flavor of a Bloodthirster. He also causes constant power recharge rate reduction by 1. And I don't know if this affects you and the enemy, but I'm pretty sure it affects you. So this is a little bit of a drawback, but it's not that bad. It's just 1 per 25, so it's not that big a deal. Then we have Chaos Blessings, which increases his weapon damage as long as he is healthy enough for it, I guess. He's unbreakable, so he'll stay there until he's dead or everything around him is dead. Causes terror, and got pretty good magic resistance, so he's not gonna get sniped by spells, and a good fire resistance, which is gonna increase as well with the Blood Rage. So overall, really strong unit. But I'll also show you how you get each of these units in just a second. So let's go through how we get all of these units in the campaign. So the first thing is we get the demon units from Chaotic Sacrifices. This is a new campaign mechanic that's been introduced in Warriors of Chaos in Grimhammer. And you get this Dark Devotion, which is a new currency, by raising settlements. You get it by winning battles, you get some from events, and you get a little bit of trickle from technologies. And these Dark Devotions can be used to get different banners from each of the gods. You get a buff from the gods and some campaign bonuses. But the big thing is you get the demon units. So here in the Khorne tab we get the Bloodletters. In the Nurgle tab we get the Plaguebearers. In the Slaanesh tab we get the Demonets, and the Tzeentch gets the Pink Horrors. Pretty straightforward. Get some Dark Devotion, get some demons. And this will be available to you straight from the get-go when you start a campaign. You just have to raise a couple of settlements and you can get your first demons. But they are pretty expensive for the early game, so they usually get going during the mid-game. But they are so worth it, they're so good, and they're just so fun to use. And next is how we get the god-touched human units, like the Khorne Berserkers. First, you need to build a shrine for the specific unit, or the specific god which gives you a specific unit. And you can only have one shrine in one army, so if you want all of these, you're gonna have 4 armies, each one of which specializes in one of the different units. So, say you have Archaon here with Khorne Berserkers, you can have Kolek with Shrine of Pestilence, and so on and so on. But it's not enough to just have the buildings, because you also need to have a technology for it. So, Sacrifice of Khorne here will give you access to Khorne Berserkers. As long as you have the Khorne Berserker shrine in your army, then you can recruit Khorne Berserkers. Same is true for the other special units. And as you can see, the Grimhammer mod has overhauled the technology tree for Warriors of Chaos significantly, and it's a really good change. But that's not why we're here. The next is the cultists, which you get in Chaos Fortresses, which is also a new mechanic in Grimhammer, which is every province capital allows you to make a Chaos Fortress when you conquer it, which basically helps you with your economy as Warriors of Chaos. So just get a bunch of these and you'll be fine on money. But the tier 1 just settlement building will allow you to recruit Chaos Cultists. So just have to get a Chaos Fortress and you'll have access to the Chaos Cultists. But we also... No, wait. We have to go to Archaon. We also have the Hounds of Decay, which is just build the tier 3 buildings for Marauder Horsemen and Marauders. So, yeah. Very simple way to get it. Just build the buildings and you can get Hounds of Decay. And last but not least, the Bloodletter. So, first you need the war portal under construction, which only takes 1 turn to build, but once you built it, everyone hates you. You get a diplomatic relations penalty of 250 with all factions except for the Chaos factions. And then you have to finish the Bloody War Portal, which allows you to build the Greater Demon of Corn. But the Bloody War Portal is tier 5, so you probably don't want to build this until you are already at tier 5. Because it also impacts your Winds of Magic reserve, your research rate tanks, and enemies that tries to stop this will be stronger. Now it's worth noting that I thought maybe they would spawn in some armies, but that's not the case. It's just if someone comes and tries to raise it, they'll be stronger. But if you just kill everything around, then that won't be a problem, now will it? But this Bloody War Portal, it takes 50 turns to build. So you have to sit with this penalty for 50 turns before you can get your Greater Demon of Corn. But once this is finished, we can just pass the turn and see. So, the portal is done, and we can finally recruit our Greater Demon. So, we just recruited from the Hero tab, and he is pretty expensive upkeep, but, I mean, it's worth it.
They will be dominated.
So he's got a really cool model. And let's have a look at his skill tree a little bit. So he comes with all of these campaign bonuses. He gains some experience for all armies faction wide, chaos corruption, some leadership when laying siege. You get casualties suffered from chaos attrition for enemies in the same area, and we got the hero recruit rank for faction wide. And then we have these 3 trees, which basically debuffs. This debuffs the enemies in the province. This debuffs our army a little bit, but increases their it increases their attacks basically, and this decreases the greater demon's defense, but increases his offense. So basically making more of a glass cannon. And this is where you get all the abilities went through earlier in the video as well. So that's basically the Great Demon of Khorne. And yeah, the Grimhammer team has done such a good job with this campaign. I recently finished a playthrough. If you want to watch it on my channel, it was so much fun. All the demons are so fun to use, and all the model work especially has been incredible. So if you want to watch through a campaign, then hop on through my channel and watch the finished campaign. And if not, I highly recommend you play it, because it's so much fun. And they really fixed the Warriors of Chaos, because I found them one of the worst factions to play campaign earlier, but now it's probably one of my favorite campaign I've ever played. So good job on the mod. So yeah, that's gonna be it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, consider leaving a comment and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.